Welcome to episode 23 of Dad and the Jiu-Jitsu Kid. Thanks for joining Ryan and I in this amazing episode that we were able to record yesterday with an amazing guest, an amazing jiu-jitsu practitioner, and just a great person just to meet all around. And we were able to meet Professor Flavio Almeida and sit down with him at his academy at North Phoenix at his Gracie Barra location. And we had such an amazing time. We were able to discuss every topic that we were asked, and he was open and he was very friendly. We enjoyed every moment that we were there. But most of all that we took back from it was not the negative of course, that everybody wants questions about and wants to hear him speak about. But we took so much positive away from him that it completely just takes over the podcast. He has everything, his philosophy on life and jiu-jitsu. We were amazed. I mean, we should have been the Flavio podcast from the beginning. I even told him, I just said, we were so impressed just by the way he was. And just based how candidly he was about everything that happened. If this is your first time here, thank you for coming in and listening to this episode too. But also too, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and listen to the backlog of episodes. We have so many amazing guests that we've had in the past year. And make sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes to make sure you get all the latest episodes when they come out. Follow us on YouTube. There's an awesome teaser that I created for Professor Flavio, and I'm getting a lot of great feedback from that. When it came out, I put it out yesterday during Fight to Win, and it kind of created a buzz, and everybody's wondering what we spoke about. And pretty much, I mean, Professor was really open about everything. Of course, there was some things that he couldn't say. We respected that, but also too, there's a lot of honesty into what he said. So I hope everybody enjoys the show. Don't forget to follow us on our website too at www.dadandthejujitsukid.com, and make sure you follow us on Instagram at dadandthejujitsukid, and make sure to keep supporting us. Thanks, guys.
What is this?
The show is about nothing. It's about a man and his kid.
Does he have superpowers too?
Dad and the Jiu-Jitsu Kid.
He's just a special kid.
You are now DQ'd.
Fight!
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Dad and the Jiu-Jitsu Kid. Thank you for joining Ryan and I, and we have a great guest today, an amazing guest that we have been excited for a long time to have, Professor Flavio Almeida. Thank you, Professor, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a huge pleasure to be here. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Thank you. I know, and thank you for inviting us to your beautiful school up here in North Phoenix. And also, too, I'm glad we did this now and not in July or August.
Definitely. Everybody loves Arizona this time of the year.
Yeah, everybody's ready to leave and come July and August, though.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to be here. And so it's a big day. I saw when we came in, I mean, you had class going and you had a lot of competitors going, and we have Fight to Win at 99 tonight.
Yep.
Here in Scottsdale. How many guys do you guys have?
I'm pretty sure we have 6 guys.
Okay.
Nobody from this school specifically, but I think all of the Gracie Barra competitors come from our schools here in the Valley. Okay. And I'm happy about this card because, we don't get to pick which fighters are going to be picked by the organization. It's kind of weird the way they do it. I don't know what kind of criteria. But anyways, the guys that are going in are pretty high-level guys. Okay. And I love to watch them compete. And not that, if you're not high-level, I don't like to watch you compete. But, for a tournament setting like a Fight to Win, I really like to bring our best guys because it's a stage. It's just them. There is flow grappling covering it, and I'm a very competitive guy, and I like to display the best possible jiu-jitsu that we have at any weight division when all eyes are on us.
Yes, and it's gonna be a big stage. I know. It's a Fight to Win is now. They put out they're doing Fight to Win 100 in Hawaii, and that's huge for something that came out of a vision that Seth Daniels had. How do you see that format now, being in jiu-jitsu for such a long time? Mm-hmm. How do you see the super fight format? Is that something that you like?
I love it. I mean, it was interesting. So first, speaking as an athlete, my first ever super fight was a Fight to Win. I think maybe a year and a half ago. So I spent like my 20-something years career as a jiu-jitsu athlete, just competing in regular tournaments. It's a totally different experience. Even like the motivation, right? When you go to a tournament and, you know, I've learning jiu-jitsu at Gracie Barra with Master Carlos, you learn very early to do it for the team. So I always had this motivation that even though it's an individual sport, I was like, you know, I want to do this for Gracie Barra, or when you're so tired and you're about to quit and you're like, I gotta do this for the team. You know, it's always big in us. And yet when you go to a super fight and there's smoke and, you know, and there's music, it's a little bit weird in that sense, at least for me, a guy with my background. But anyways, the experience was great. I think what Seth is doing with Fight to Win is very beneficial for Jiu-Jitsu. For the main reason is not only it's a great model that allows the fighters to benefit from it financially, but most important, I think he came up with a pretty simple set of rules, but also the show that he puts together makes it exciting for people to watch, even if they don't know much about Jiu-Jitsu, right? Jiu-Jitsu is not a spectator sport. I don't think it's ever going to be, because it's too complicated and boring for the untrained eye. But he's brought it to a place that's never been before, in my opinion, and he made it exciting to watch to a certain extent, and it involves people who are not necessarily jiu-jitsu practitioners, because it usually happens at night, and they make it, you know, you see couples there, they just make like a date night for them. Mm-hmm. And I think stuff like that is important to move the sport forward.
Yeah, I like your analogy, especially of the thought of not being a spectator friendly sport. It's great when like grandma and grandpa come and see, you know, their grandkid and like, oh, okay, it's time to go.
Yeah.
You know, but you really have to enjoy the sport and understand the sport. Yeah. And I think really enjoy someone's technique, even if they may not be a famous or that big of a name, but you recognize like, wow, that person, purple belt or brown belt has a great technique. I've never heard of them, and that's such a great platform too, I think, for people like getting more exposure. You see a lot of, I think, because people are fighting and they know it's submission, and they like, I got to get a submission. It's not for points, and I'm gonna try that flying armbar now. I'm gonna try that, you know, whatever flying triangle now. I'm gonna, cartwheel to do this, and it gives a really good platform for not just the athlete, but I think jiu-jitsu, just in general, like to say like, hey, there's a great, a lot of great people that are out there, thousands of jiu-jitsu practitioners, and you just don't have to watch like the same style athlete. Yeah. Here's somebody that's like, every time we see, like, you see like the new move or some fancy like move that they will never try at Worlds, but they'll try it at Fight to Win. Because I think, like you say, the crowd gets you, the crowd and the music gets you going. And so I've always liked that format. Why it kind of, I shared it with you, and I think in a message too. It's like, gosh, sometimes you get kind of so inundated with such like negative from posts, and like Instagram's turning into like a lot of like show, like, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but like really show business wise, where people are trying to promote themselves.
Yeah, they're trying to impress.
And trying to be the Conor McGregor, I think would be probably the best analogy for it. And the Fight to Win gave it a stage, I think. And now you see a lot of organizations now trying to mirror that or do something better. Now I think it kind of it set the level up, and I think there's other people like, okay, we're got to be at that level, and now Fight to Win's got to be like, okay, now we got to pass them. And so I think it's going to be good for the sport, because they get more entertaining. Yeah. And I think more too, I think you see a lot more competitors and athletes actually getting paid now. Yeah. So that's how do you like the format of that? Is now the jiu-jitsu competitors getting paid?
I like it. Yeah, I think it's important. And like I said, I think for jiu-jitsu competitors to ever make big money, outside of money coming from the sheik who has more money than he can spend, that's beyond the point. There's got to be an economics behind paying big purses to jiu-jitsu jiu-jitsu athletes, and for that to happen, it's got to become an spectator sport. And I think Fight to Win and some other organizations are starting to scratch that surface. It's extremely important, but I'm a little bit skeptical about it because how complicated jiu-jitsu is. What makes a sport fun to watch is that you can have a very clear understanding of who's winning and what the goal is, right? So if you bring your grandpa to a jiu-jitsu tournament, the first question grandma or grandpa are going to ask, even if they're watching their own grandson, right? It's like, who's winning? You can't really tell because, you
could be on the bottom and win.
Exactly, right? So I remember my grandpa, he was a deck athlete, right? He was in track and field. So, winning a race is very clear. You can see who's winning. Like, you can't really tell who's winning in jiu-jitsu fight. Even in MMA, you can tell who's winning. So that's why jiu-jitsu is, quote unquote, boring for somebody who doesn't understand, because you can't appreciate what's going on. You can't tell who's winning, who's losing. But, I learned jiu-jitsu. I started learning jiu-jitsu 25 years ago, so I'm trapped on a certain mindset. I'm sure like Seth and these other promoters, they're trying to figure this thing out. And if jiu-jitsu, so to answer your question, I believe it's absolutely important for jiu-jitsu athletes to be paid. And, I think that if in the future they can figure out a model that jiu-jitsu becomes more of an spectator sport, that people are willing to pay to watch, then you have money flowing. Then you have the economics to be able to pay big purses to athletes. And have these guys elongating their career, because what you have now is you have maybe a 10-year time span that jiu-jitsu athletes can really dedicate their very best to it if they have the support of their parents, right? Or they are lucky to have somebody acting as such in their lives, giving them financial support. Outside of that, they become part-time athletes, and because they have to open their own academies and they have to teach, which is a great thing for another reason, but you're not necessarily going to see how far an athlete could go because they have to stop dedicating themselves full time to it. So if it ever becomes an spectator sport, and if there's ever economics for promoters to pay big purses to athletes, I think it's going to do great for the sport. I think it's going to move the jiu-jitsu technique that is already evolving so fast even further. And we're going to be able to see the sport breaking through levels that were unimaginable for us that started learning jiu-jitsu back in the 90s or 80s,
Yeah, how would you, is there when the future of it, do you see jiu-jitsu being a mainstream sport like baseball, or not maybe baseball, but not like Major League Baseball, but would it be like where it's so normal like that maybe schools might have it, like public schools here in North America might have it as a class? Do you think it'll ever be at that level?
I don't know. It's hard to predict that. I think jiu-jitsu deals with there's some interesting things to be said about that. So first, let me say, I think jiu-jitsu deals with a lot of prejudice in a sense that it's a new art compared to other grappling arts. I think as far as like bringing jiu-jitsu to the Olympics, there's a lot of lobbying that comes from older grappling arts like judo and wrestling that it's very hard for jiu-jitsu to battle to get to the Olympics, at least the jiu-jitsu that we know. If we ever get to the Olympics, I think it's going to be a different variation of the jiu-jitsu that we know, that we practice nowadays. Now, getting to the school system, we saw judo, which is technically jiu-jitsu standing up, getting into the school system in Japan, and it's still big. I think the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, also has implemented on the school system. But man, there's a tough battle here in the United States, because traditional sports, they're just huge, and to think that jiu-jitsu is ever going to be in schools as opposed to wrestling or as an alternative to wrestling, I don't know. It's very hard to see that happening anytime soon. Now, do I want that to happen? Honestly, I don't know, because I am a jiu-jitsu instructor and I live out of a jiu-jitsu academy. And if jiu-jitsu is being offered in every high school here in Phoenix, Arizona, I'm not sure what was going to happen to our student bases. Yeah. But, the growth of the sport comes first, whatever needs to happen for the sport to keep evolving. I think it should, but I don't know exactly how that could happen over the next 5 to 10 years, even becoming mainstream. Again, because it's not a spectator sport, and that holds the sport down quite a lot.
Yeah, I wonder if it's rule changes or something has to change, not I don't know, deviating from like the jiu-jitsu now. I'm sure from jiu-jitsu now to 10 years ago and maybe even 20 years ago, it's way different. With the point systems and how the competitiveness, and what it would have to do to get it spectator friendly.
Yeah.
Because the judo did this kind of the same thing too. They changed it in the Olympics so it could be, spectator friendly.
100%.
They changed the rule for
because the takedown is more fun to watch.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes more sense.
Yeah, exactly. And so how would you have a sport where it's just all on the bottom?
Yeah.
And they're trying to keep in judo, they're trying to take judo out. They did from like, hey, well, you only have a certain amount of seconds to be on the bottom. And, in jiu-jitsu, how is it going to be a sport? Like, well, where 90% of the whole fight is on the floor.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a different.
I think there's a point to be made too, like, because we're talking about like jiu-jitsu becoming more mainstream. Jiu-jitsu's never been mainstream. I don't know if it's ever going to be, but that's one interesting thing that people need to understand. It's never prevented jiu-jitsu from growing, right? Jiu-jitsu is growing crazily worldwide here in the United States. In Brazil, man, people refer to jiu-jitsu in Brazil in the 90s. People think that everybody did jiu-jitsu. It's not the case. It was a minority of people that did jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu is huge in Brazil now, much like 10 times bigger than what it was in the 90s. And it's growing all over the place. So not being a mainstream sports never held us back. And actually, I personally believe that the fact that every jiu-jitsu athlete needs to be an instructor as well has fueled the growth of jiu-jitsu around the world. Like, think about it. Speak about Gracie Barra athletes that I know, like the major guys like Professor Braulio Estima, Professor Rômulo Barral, Professor Otávio Souza. These are some of like the greatest names of Gracie Barra in recent generations. They all have their Gracie Barra schools. They all teach. They've been teaching throughout their careers. So, what other sport has that? Like, as far as I know, and I don't know much about any other sport, but, if you like basketball, I don't think you could go to a school and learn basketball from Michael Jordan, could you?
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
And jiu-jitsu is very unique that way. And people, and these instructors, these athletes, they know they can't make money as athletes. So they end up opening schools, and that kind of creates its own demand, because a jiu-jitsu instructor is not like a sandwich shop. You just open shop and people are going to come in to eat sandwich. If you want to run a successful jiu-jitsu academy, you literally have to drag people into the doors and show them that what we do is actually cool and fun and beneficial to them, So I think the fact that jiu-jitsu is growing so much has to do with the fact that we're not a spectator sport, that we're not a mainstream sport. And if we ever become a mainstream sport, we got to watch out to make sure that we still have the impetus to growth and to continue to bring jiu-jitsu to as many people as we can, instead of becoming a sport that is pretty much controlled by the media and exists for the sake of the spectacle of the display of great technique.
Yeah, you touched on a subject that you were talking about before, where you can't train with Michael Jordan, you can't train with like these top name athletes, but you can in jiu-jitsu. You can go sit take a class from Professor Rômulo Barral. You could take a class from whoever famous person jiu-jitsu that has their own school. And you touched on the part of like the business aspect of jiu-jitsu, and you and I have the same. We learned that we have like the same idea or feel the same way. I think, where it's not just open the door and open and automatically. Oh wow, there's like you said, a sandwich shop. Let's go stop by and they don't think they drive by jiu-jitsu like I don't know what that is. Gracie Barra. Like, what is that? I don't know. Just keep driving. They don't have you have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
So like, there has to be the old school mentality. I don't know if it's the old school mentality the right way to say it, but I think people are afraid to incorporate jiu-jitsu and business together. And we were talking about that. I was like, well, as great, people want to share jiu-jitsu so much and they love it and they want to share jiu-jitsu for everybody, but you're not going to be able to share jiu-jitsu to anybody.
Yeah.
Unless you get people in the doors, right? And that's one of the greatest things that Gracie Barra has been amazing. Following you and seeing the steps that Gracie Barra is doing, and congratulations to you guys up here. You guys have 3 certified schools now from Gracie Barra.
Yeah.
And that's like
a big
that.
deal.
That's a huge
It's a big
thing.
deal, yeah.
And to you guys, and it's a great thing to show to people like coming in the doors. I'm like, this is what we do, and this is a standard because not every Gracie Barra got this award, right?
No.
What falls in this category, or what is this?
It's technically, it's a school certification program, so it's something that Gracie Barra does. It's quality control, pretty much, and they want to make sure that we're following the highest level of standards, really, for teaching practices and management practices. And it's over like 100 items that get verified, and it's not hard to comply with everything. But so when you do comply, it's a yearly thing. You are technically called a Gracie Barra Premium School, and it's something that we take a huge pride on. There is over 160 Gracie Barra locations in North America, and this first batch, I think only 20 schools were able to meet all the requirements. But you touched on something very interesting. It's a lot of people that have been training jiu-jitsu for a long time, and they're jiu-jitsu instructors, and they're amazing teachers, and they have this anti-business mindset, and I get it. Like I'm an old school guy. I started training jiu-jitsu in 1993. I got my black belt in 1999. I've competed in all kinds of tournaments. I've been out there for a long time, and I get it. I think that comes from. Here's where I think that comes from. We love jiu-jitsu so much, and we know how amazing jiu-jitsu is, that we believe that we shouldn't have to promote it. Because if jiu-jitsu is so good, why would I have to promote it? People should just come through our doors, right? I don't have to promote it because jiu-jitsu is such an amazing thing. But that way of thinking misses the fact that a lot of people just don't know how jiu-jitsu can benefit them. They can understand that jiu-jitsu is self-defense and it's martial arts. They can understand for that, but people don't know how jiu-jitsu can benefit them, just like a lot of people don't know how a lot of things can benefit them. And it's the teachers, they can't see when they go market their schools or even when they're selling a membership. They got to see it as a process of educating people on the value that jiu-jitsu can bring to their lives. So when you do a Facebook ad or when you're out there in the community and you're doing a demonstration, what you're doing, you're not marketing, you're educating people, just like you're educating people on the mats every single day. Because if you teach a class, you want to go through the moves and you want to teach an armbar or berimbolo or whatever that is, but you don't teach why jiu-jitsu is important for them and how jiu-jitsu is going to impact their lives. If you don't help your students see it, they will leave, right? So the role of a jiu-jitsu instructor is the role of educating people on the benefits of jiu-jitsu. And you have to do that with your existing students every single day when you teach class, when you make social media posts, when you send them an email. But you also have to do with people that have no clue of what jiu-jitsu is. You have to educate them that there is amazing art, this amazing group of people who think about nothing else but making themselves better through jiu-jitsu. And they're very excited to welcome people who don't train to make them part of the family as well, because as the family grows, we all grow. And when somebody walks into your school and they take their first class, you educate them again on the benefits of jiu-jitsu. When you sit down with them to enroll them as a member, it's also about educating them and showing them that jiu-jitsu has so much value that it's worth investing $150, $200 a month in tuition, because what you're going to get from it is worth to you or to your family way more than what you're putting in. So I don't see anything that we do as, we're marketing jiu-jitsu, we're selling jiu-jitsu. No, we're just being jiu-jitsu instructors to the extreme of the meaning of that word. What does a teacher do? He educates people. And we're just making sure that we educate anybody that we have an opportunity to interact with, not just our existing members.
Yeah, you touched on, and you said it a few times before, even before we started recording, is value. And the value of a lot of times value to somebody is priceless. To a point, of course, but especially when you show someone that comes off the streets, I saw self-defense. So obviously that's probably somebody, the reason why they came in is because they want self-defense.
Most people, yeah.
Or something like, I saw fitness on your ad or something, like, that's what I want to do and I want to be fit. But then say jiu-jitsu, like they probably don't even say like, I want to do jiu-jitsu, right? I'm not sure if anybody comes in like, I want to do jiu-jitsu. Some people I know, they want to start, and that I've run into a lot of times, they say like, I want to be in shape. And then they get into like, I want to compete and do jiu-jitsu and do, all these great things. what value do you guys do? What value does Gracie Barra, what do they value? What do they value in sharing and with their students?
We value jiu-jitsu as a tool to improve people's lives. That's what I believe we value the most, right? Our primary focus on every single thing that we do within the organization is to make sure that what we're doing is improving their lives and is helping them accomplish their goals, right? That's one thing that is very clear to us. Now, how do we do that is something that is worth looking into. We believe in teamwork. We believe, we talk about being a family, and it's not just something that we say because it's nice to say. It's something that we live by, in a sense that one of the first lessons that Gracie Barra students learn is that they are not just here for themselves. They're also here for each other, right? And to be able to achieve your personal best through jiu-jitsu, you have to focus not only on your own training or on what your training partner can do for you, but you have to focus on what you can do for your training partner. And we try to teach them to think beyond the winning and losing mindset, and we try to get them to understand that the goal of practice is not to win the next sparring session or to pass the guard or to sweep or to submit. The goal is to learn, right? So the worthiness of practice should be valued or based on how much you've improved from each session. Even if that meant that the guy passed your guard, even if that meant you couldn't really actually learn that technique. So we try to make our students understand that there is more into jiu-jitsu than just the technique per se. Then jiu-jitsu is actually a tool that we can get better if we're willing to engage in it, in a sense that we're trying to improve ourselves while we help our friends, our training partners improve as well. So in a few words, I think one of the core values of Gracie Barra is the value of brotherhood. First and foremost, we are a big team, we're a big family. We take care of each other, we have each other's back. And then the second one is actually development, right? So they tie together very well, It's not just about being a brotherhood, like just a bunch of people that hang out together. We have a goal, and development stands for we want to get better through the sport, right? And then the third core value of Gracie Barra is integrity, right? We want to be a team, we want to be a family, we want to rely on each other to get better, but we want to evolve in a way that is aligned and connected with the best that we have, but also with the essence of jiu-jitsu in our own traditions, right? We don't ever want to depart away from what jiu-jitsu is, which is it's a grappling art. It's based on leverage. It's based on empowering somebody who's smaller, weaker, or not as athletic to be able to protect him or herself against somebody who's bigger, stronger, and heavier. Those are like the core ideals behind the sport that we never want to depart away from it. And that's important because, it's a world, the world of fighting now is interpreted through the lenses of mixed martial arts, which is a mix of everything and it's constantly evolving. And Gracie Barra is always very big on traditions and make sure that we stay rooted in where we come from so we can continue to evolve within who we are instead of becoming something else.
Okay. Sorry about that, Professor.
No problem.
Okay, everybody. Sorry, my microphone actually went out. I love the way you touched on a very meaningful subject, and it's one of the things that attracted when I was like, I've always been a big fan of any black belt competing or anybody that's famous, I guess, and of course. But you, maybe a year ago, you posted on something. And I never really thought about it. You posted on an ad from it was a gi manufacturer that says you can't teach heart is like their tagline.
Yeah.
And you had a different idea about that as far as that you can teach heart.
Yeah.
Right? Can you touch a little bit about that? That kind of what made you react to that, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So I think that's exactly what we teach. We teach heart. I think this is a huge debate between innate abilities versus learned abilities, and what makes a person successful. Is it talent, or is it hard work and things that you learn after you're born? I don't deny the existence of innate talents, but I believe from my personal experience, and I can speak just based on that and books that I've read, that a huge part of what makes somebody successful, or whatever you want to define success, but somebody outstanding on their field, is their ability to learn, their ability to overcome adversities, and their ability to bounce back from failure. And that's hard. And I think that, if you start digging into it, a lot of people say, yeah, you can learn, how to be faster, or you can learn how to become stronger, or have better technique for this or better technique for that. But if there's one thing that you can't really learn, is heart or mental toughness, right? And I know from a personal example that wasn't the case. I was telling you, I was looking at Ryan. Looks like a great kid and very confident on himself, and he looks at me in the eyes, and Ryan's 13 years old. When I started training jiu-jitsu, I was 13 years old, and I lacked everything you can possibly imagine that we consider like the character traits of a champion. I didn't have discipline. I had very low self-esteem. I lacked self-confidence. I didn't keep my promises. So you fast forward 25 years after I began training jiu-jitsu, and I am who I am. Now, I'm not the one to claim if I'm a successful guy or not. That's up to people to judge, because people have different definitions of success. But I'm happy with the person I've become. If there's one thing I can tell for sure, is that I have heart and I have mental toughness. It's very hard to break me in all senses, from like a long meeting to a tough training session to a tournament setting. It's very hard to break it. We all have a point that we break, but I'm tough, and I learned that through jiu-jitsu. So when somebody comes out and say you can't teach heart, I'm going to disagree. But I also disagree because it kind of tells people around there that we don't do what we do. When I'm coming here every day to teach, I'm not teaching chokes and arm bars only. I use those things to teach important life lessons so people can become a little bit meaner, in a sense that I want them to step out of here a little bit tougher, a little bit more prepared to deal with the challenges that life's going to throw at them. And even if it's our, these young men that we have here and women that are training to become the next world champions, even with them, I'm not just teaching them the next breakthrough jiu-jitsu technique, even though we go over those things, but I teach them how to be tougher, how to wake up earlier, how to take care of themselves, how to deal with tough situations in jiu-jitsu and in life. And I think that those lessons are way more important than any jiu-jitsu technique you can learn. So when somebody comes out and says you can't teach hard, I tend to take it personally. So when I made that post, I noticed the company actually came and commented on the thread, and they tried to explain that I can't teach hard does not mean that somebody cannot come and learn hard in my school. I get it, but then I went to their website and I read it. It's actually very nice, the paragraphs that they have there to explain what I can't teach hard mean. But man, if you put something out there expecting that people need to read 4 paragraphs to understand what it means, maybe you should review how you're putting that thing out there, because young men and women nowadays, well, most people in general don't read anything. So what you put out there, a phrase that you put out there, has a lot of impact. And when an athlete wins a championship and they open their gi and it has a big patch that says, I can't teach hard, you're sending a message out there. What do you mean? Like, do you mean that you didn't learn hard from your instructor, like you discrediting the people that put so much into you. It doesn't make sense. So especially with athletes, because all the eyes are on them, they have to be careful with what they stand for in public, what they write in social media, what they say, and how they behave, because they're influencing another generation of athletes. And as an old school martial artist, I'm always going to stand for the things I believe is right for everyone, not just for myself. And if there's one thing I know is that I can't teach hard, because I learn hard and I teach hard every day. And when somebody goes out there and says, I can't teach hard, I'm going to have to disagree. And if they put a few paragraphs to explain that I can't teach hard actually doesn't mean you can't teach hard, it means something else, I respect that and I love those things. But the reality of it is you got to be careful with those quotes and those phrases, those hashtags,
Yeah, it's really awesome. I love hearing you, because you sat up on your chair you to say that. It's very passionate, and I could see it in you, because and I think a lot of coaches too, my professor, other professors that I've ran across too, because you see when they light up and they talk about a student, that they came in super shy and they don't want to do, they can't they can never imagine having somebody on top of them, let alone maybe a woman having a male training partner on top of them. And everybody that I've run across, every professor, like that's like the most rewarding thing that they ever come across is seeing somebody break that and have heart. Okay, now that for her or that person, that might be the most terrifying thing in the world for them. You never know what their background is. If somebody has a background in somebody, the jiu-jitsu drew them somewhere to the sport for a reason, or that person. And it made them stick around for a reason. Maybe they are completely never played any sport whatsoever, but something in the sport and the instructor, maybe also too, is like, you're teaching them something that they've never had. And I love the passion when every professor talks about it. Even my professor says, oh wow, so-and-so, man, I remember they couldn't do, they're competing, and they don't care. They're like the shyest people and they don't care. They're like a different, on the mat and training, they're one way, and then on tournament day, they're like, I have no idea who that person is. They're a fierce competitor. They have no fear now. They overcame whatever obstacle that they did, and that's amazing. And they use how passionate you are. I love that, how passionate you are about that, because it is everybody has a story somehow, and I love the part of when you, the heart in you, and then you touched on how Gracie Barra how close it is, and I saw it. I always saw it at every tournament, at every fight to win. Man, the sea of red, and you get them going. It doesn't matter if the team didn't podium, but even if they didn't, they left like they podiumed. They're cheering like it didn't matter. Like you just they're there.
It's beyond that.
And I saw the camaraderie, the family more this last few months with the incidents that happened with you. And I've never seen that in not just in organizations, but also too, and me to have yourself, you overcame something, but as a team, how did this, and I'm referring to is what happened at Nogi World, and how did that affect the team, your team, from what happened?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought it up. I think it's the first time that I'm having a chance to speak about this episode openly, outside of like the walls of the virtual walls of Gracie Barra. It was first, it wasn't an attack against me. It was an attack against Gracie Barra and everything that we stand for. And I think your question was more like in terms of like how do I interpret the reaction, right? How Gracie Barra reacted to it. Man, I've never seen Gracie Barra be what it is in its most purest form, right? The values that we stand for, as I've seen over this past 6 weeks, right? We pride ourselves of having each other's back. And, but it's a large organization. There's over 100,000 Gracie Barra students all over the world. We just break through the mark of 800 locations worldwide. So you can only imagine, like, how do you keep that many people functioning well together with the different roles that they play? But man, it was incredible the amount of support that I received and how the organization was so connected in a time of the year that everybody's just focusing on their own things, right? It's Christmas and it's New Year's and it's usually a time that most of us are less connected with jiu-jitsu, but it was just amazing how everybody came together. It was some very dark weeks for me, because when you get hit like that, it kind of messes up with you, like with your own identity, and you're trying to understand what it means. A good chunk of your pride gets taken away from you, especially being a fighter, a martial artist. So I had to understand what had happened to me, but just like waves and waves of messages of support, to a point I just couldn't get back to everybody. But anyways, I just loved how our main leader, Master Carlos Gracie Jr., what he stood for, because it was a very difficult situation for him, It involved his own family, and how he called me and he came up with this idea that was, I was a little hesitant at first, because I thought it was over a little bit too much, because he wanted to come to Arizona for the first time. He's never been to Arizona for my birthday. He's like, man, I want to spend time with you. You're like a son to me. I can't believe this happened. We need to spend time together. He wanted to come to Arizona and said, he offered, man, I'll go to your school. We'll celebrate your birthday together. Bring all of your students. We really want to make this something special for you and for everybody. And I want to be able to speak to the people from Gracie Barra about what my perspective is on this and why I think that happened. So anyways, he came and he had a seminar here. We had over 200 people on the mats, and it was just incredible. But most important, how Gracie Barra did not react or try to retaliate on that same level. It was a very violent episode that I personally could have easily responded on that same level. But when I finally, because I was knocked out, and when I finally stood back up and I tried to made sense of what happened, I realized that I was attacked and knew who attacked me. The first thing that came to my mind was like, man, I could just kick the shit out of this bastard right here, right now. Because he's much smaller than me, he's older than me. I would have no problem doing that. And man, I had so much anger in me for being attacked like that. But had I done that, I would drag the whole organization down with me. Just imagine, if I attacked the other individual, now you have people from the two different groups fighting each other. Imagine this scene. Imagine how bad this would have been to jiu-jitsu. So I'm glad I was surrounded by people that helped me regain my senses, and we walked out, right? And what followed after that, that's what really makes me proud of the whole organization, is that at no point people were like, yeah, let's get together. Let's do a dojo storm. Let's go get these guys,
it's like the streets of Rio again.
Yeah,
Right?
come on, man. We're beyond that, So I'm glad that myself and the leaders of the organization and the organization as a whole were like, we have to respond to this at a much higher level. We have to find something positive to learn from this experience, and we have to try to use this as an opportunity to move the organization forward and to move the sport forward. And I think the battle here is not us versus them. I think the battle is how to make sure that this thug mentality that still exists in jiu-jitsu, that makes use of the power that jiu-jitsu gives to you for personal gains, that this thing gets to be eradicated once and for all, because jiu-jitsu is a beautiful sport. It does incredible things for people, and there's just no space for this type of behavior or ideology within the sport anymore. And I hope this episode serves as a learning lesson for myself, for Gracie Barra, and for everybody in the jiu-jitsu community, and to never let this type of thing ever happen again, because this is ultimately the biggest damage has been to jiu-jitsu, not to Gracie Barra, not to me, and not to anybody else.
Yeah, I like that. I think it showed a lot, and I understand your reaction. Of course, you hatred and everything, and there's no, there's no worse thing. And I always explain that to Ryan, and I always felt that, and there's no weakness more that you can show. The most weakness you can show is when you lose your temper.
Yeah.
is where you have no control of yourself.
100%.
And I was like, that's the worst feeling. And that's I think the lowest point that you can be at, because you yourself can't even control yourself.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense. Like, how do you not? And I've talked to him about that, about trying to control your emotions. And so I could see like definitely like where you want to retaliate, and especially people that love you or something, like want to retaliate back. And that's like, no, that's because I'm sure you have a lot of students that view you like you might view Master Carlos like a father figure.
Yeah.
The students you have that view you that way, and like that's that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But to see their restraint, that's great, and I love that part that happened, and because I've always read articles or posts. It's always like, people want to stay with that old school. There's a difference between, I always felt, old school jiu-jitsu, like takedowns, guard passing, and then old school, like when I heard stories of like the Vale Tudo jiu-jitsu wars on the beach of Copacabana kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, there's not a place for that here now. And people always bring up like, well, that's where jiu-jitsu came from. If that's where jiu-jitsu came from and that's still jiu-jitsu now, then I don't think any progress has been made at all.
Well, jiu-jitsu didn't come from that. Jiu-jitsu didn't come from that at all. Jiu-jitsu comes from the philosophy of the samurai, and jiu-jitsu comes from a process of trying to make martial arts something beneficial for regular citizens. Jiu-jitsu comes from the understanding of very, very sophisticated individuals, high-level martial artists, including Jigoro Kano, the guy that created judo, that the practice of martial arts could create better human beings. That's where jiu-jitsu comes from. Now, you fast forward a few decades, jiu-jitsu lands in Brazil. The first Gracie to learn jiu-jitsu was Carlos Gracie Sr. Carlos Gracie Sr. was the only reason why he became so motivated with jiu-jitsu, with Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, eventually known as Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, is because he experienced for himself the transformational powers that Jiu-Jitsu can do to a person. He was a very wild kid, out of control, to use your own words. Like, he totally lacked self-control. There's some very funny stories about him, and his father just didn't know what to do with him anymore, and he was like, well, I heard there is this Japanese guy, Mitsui Maeda, teaching jiu-jitsu in town. That was in Belém do Pará, in North Brazil. And well, let me give this thing a try, because I learned through martial arts people can learn self-control. So he went in there, he learned, 5 years, he learned from Maeda from 5 years, and he saw how much jiu-jitsu did for him. So Carlos' primary motivation to teach jiu-jitsu to his brothers and to create the Gracie clan was not to beat people up or to control people. It was to do for others what jiu-jitsu has done for him. Right? And they founded the first Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy in downtown Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And that academy was very similar to the more modern Jiu-Jitsu academies you see nowadays. The first Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy in downtown Brazil had attendance cards, had curriculum, had private lessons, had uniforms. In fact, from what I could gather, they even had like a laundry inside the academy. So you pay high tuition to be able to learn jiu-jitsu. Mostly of it was private lessons. You didn't have to bring your own uniform, because the uniform would be available for you. So it was a very sophisticated enterprise that they created back then. Now, what happens after that is what makes it interesting. Of course, the Gracies, the original Gracie brothers, they had to make an effort to show to the world how great jiu-jitsu is, right? So the advent of the Vale Tudo was a marketing tool, really. The challenge fights was a marketing tool that the Gracies used. They used to challenge the biggest and strongest guy in town and show how great jiu-jitsu is. So it wasn't an end in itself. Like, it wasn't a source of violence. It was just a way to show people that jiu-jitsu is a very effective self-defense system. Now that got out of control, right? When Carlos became older, Helio became older, at some point that I don't know where, things started to go haywire, right? And people started to teach jiu-jitsu more with the thug mentality. And not all the schools, like, don't get me wrong, not all the schools. Jiu-jitsu, I mean, when I joined Gracie Barra, I never learned to be a thug. Carlos was always an educator first. And he always made sure that he taught values along with techniques, good values, good morals. So when people say, "Oh, back in the old days, that's where jiu-jitsu comes from," no, that's not where it comes from. It comes from a philosophy of personal development through the sport, through embracing the life of a martial artist is a life of constant challenge and discomfort, because your primary goal is to grow, to achieve your individual potential through the sport, and that's where jiu-jitsu comes from. Now, there was a time in the 80s, in the 90s, that most jiu-jitsu athletes, especially after the UFC, they had to prove that jiu-jitsu was efficient. So having the mindset of a warrior was always important. It continues to be very important. But when that mindset of a warrior doesn't come with a moral code that teaches respect, discipline, and it teaches you not to be a bully, that's where it becomes dangerous. So when people nowadays say that they wanna they wanna refer back to that thug mentality that was prevalent in the 90s, because that's where jiu-jitsu comes from, they're making a oversimplification that is extremely dangerous and might bring the sport back to chaos that almost killed jiu-jitsu back in Brazil.
Yeah, like that's really interesting to hear. And you always hear a story. I never heard that story like that told though from how the Gracies started, how Carlos and Helio. You always hear like, okay, you just started Carlos and Helio, but I never even thought about why they even started doing it either. So and you paint a really good timeline of their success and what they wanted to accomplish, and then you get the wrong people in there, and then that kind of takes over and that's what everybody, and I think people glorify that time in that era where it was the wars on that. People always like the Vale Tudo wars and the Vale Tudo versus Jiu-Jitsu, and there used to be fights on Rio, and that's how that's why Jiu-Jitsu is so cool, because that's where it came from, and that's and I like the way you point that out, that to not just view jiu-jitsu as that was probably a blip in the timeline of jiu-jitsu. That was just don't view it as like, wow, that was amazing. Like, no, view it as, would it be fair to say, like, view that era as kind of like, that's kind of like a shadow, like a dark shadow of jiu-jitsu. Like that's not the best time. Yeah. And I liked earlier when you mentioned, like, this is like the golden era of jiu-jitsu right now. It's an amazing time.
100%.
Where jiu-jitsu, you can do jiu-jitsu anywhere.
Yeah, there's never been a better time to be a jiu-jitsu instructor. There's never been a better time to be a jiu-jitsu athlete. And man, I was there in the 90s, like there was just no future in the sport unless like you had nothing else going on in your life. You give it a try, or you go do MMA. And you got to understand, like the early 2000s, not even the UFC was what it is now. So it was bad. And even like within my own family, my dad was like, why are you training this thing? Because Brazil, back then there was only one media channel. It's like, imagine there's only, CNN, or there's only Fox, right? And this media channel was at war against jiu-jitsu. Anything that happened bad, as far as like fights in nightclubs, like young men fighting and things like that, they would associate with the jiu-jitsu. They would even coin an expression for that. They'll call it the pit boy, like the pit bull, because jiu-jitsu guys would like pit bull for whatever reason. They call it the pit boy. And the pit boy is like this very aggressive young man that's very well trained in martial arts, and he goes to nightclubs and he beats people up, right? There was this stereotype. So middle class families, when they want to put their kids to learn good morals, the last place they would take their sons and daughters would be to a jiu-jitsu academy. So jiu-jitsu academies couldn't enroll new members. A lot of the existing members were leaving because it was just not good, and then that almost killed the sport, really. And a lot of at that time, late 90s and early 2000s, is when a lot of the senior black belts fled, and they went to the United States and to Europe and to Oceania, and it helped with the globalization of the sport. But literally, it almost died in Brazil because of that mentality. So people have to be very careful when they glorify that, using your own words, Mark, because it's a dangerous mentality. It's very destructive, and it's not going to move the sport forward. It's going to move it back, and we don't want that.
Yeah, I'm glad that the stance you guys. I'm glad to hear the stance that you guys took, and there's still a stance, and especially I didn't know that Master Carlos never came out here before. For him to show that, I'm sure it was amazing to see for the entire Gracie Barra community. Like, hey, this is see a figure of that. Like, you know, you always hear about. I'm sure you guys talk about stories of training under Master Carlos and Junior, and but to see him, like when I know how I feel when I see Master Carlos and Gracie Jr. And like you always hear the stories of him and his father, and when you kind of see him in person, that's your Michael Jordan. Yeah, like that's your like who you grew up. Like that's how it's amazing to hear or to see them, and when they talk, you value what they say because of their experience and how they're respected in the jiu-jitsu community. I did want to touch on a post that you did also too, and if, as a father, and not just a parent, as a father, and I think any parent kind of views this, is you posted on a story, your story, and I had a chance to meet one of your daughters here too, beautiful child, and where you mentioned that your kids had to kind of see you that you're not a superhero after what happened. And I mean, I don't know if am I your superhero still, Ryan? I'm like,
I don't know.
But that's right. That's like, as a father, especially as a father, like you want to protect your children and you would do anything and you act like a superhero to your kids when they're little.
Yes.
You know, now I'm like a big nerd to him because I try to.
He's trying to choke you out.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, you posted it as like they don't view you, or they might not view you the same way. Like, and that even reading at that too, we've never met or anything like that. But when somebody shares something like that, it's hard, even as a reader, as a fan, because they see you human now. They humanize you. Or my son, like, you know, he's seen me at certain phases, like where I was emotional for some reason, or I shared to him like, this is something that happened to me, and so sometimes I don't know how he reacts. He would react to it. How did I mean, that was really touching that you shared something like that. That was kind of, even though it was like one sentence that you posted that.
Yes.
That you still it's something that affected you not just physically, right? I mean, do you carry it at home, or did you carry it at home?
Yeah. So after the incident at the Nogi Worlds, I noticed that I had lost my 2 front teeth, right, and I was pretty beat up. So the first thing that I do is like, let me get out of here. This can become really bad. So I make sure the situation is under control again. Step outside. Then there's the whole like legal side of things. Police comes. That's not even interesting. But then you have, what do I do now, right? Because I had a flight to go home. Well, first, my athletes were still competing, right? So one of them that we trained really hard together, he won the finals. He became a world champion. Dream of his life, and I wasn't there for him. So that was kind of heartbreaking too. But anyways, I call one of my students. He's still in California. I said, man, I need a dentist. But you got to understand, it's like Saturday, 2:00. Like, you can't find a dentist. He's like, why do you need a dentist? I'm like, man, this happened. I can't go home like this. And he's like, why can't you go home like this? I'm like, I don't want my daughters to see. It was just the first dominant thought in my mind. I don't want my daughters to see like that.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, because I don't know. There's something about our masculinity and the way we project ourselves as fathers that we want to project ourselves to them as superheroes. But, you know, this gets very interesting because I have no idea how bad the injuries were. My teeth were in my hand, but maybe they can just glue it back together. I don't know. So anyways, I go to the dentist. I will find a dentist, super nice people. They stayed open so they could see me. And they create this mouthpiece, and they glue on a they tried their best, but it turned out very ugly. They glue whatever was left of my teeth into it, and I'm wearing this mouthpiece. But, you know, my teeth were never like very nice, but after, you know, when I put them back, I look more like Frankenstein, you know. I'm like, okay, so this is the best they can do. So I go home, I get home, and my daughter, my older daughter, she's just very, how can I say? She's very not sensitive in a bad way. She just feels things, right? So she wakes up very early, and I'm like, hey, it's good to see you. She's like, Daddy, are you okay? I'm like, I'm okay. Pretending to be right. She's like, what? You look different. I'm like, why? It's like, you look beat up. And I'm trying to hide everything, right? What happened to your teeth? I'm like, I'm fine. I just got, jiu-jitsu thing, a little accent. Oh, okay. So anyways, I just couldn't deal with that mouthpiece in my mind. Eventually, I just took it out and I just embraced the fact that I had missing teeth. And that's when it really hit them. They're like, Daddy, where are you? Where is your teeth? I'm like, so I had this accident and, this happened. So did you lose your both teeth? I'm like, yeah. And then my older daughter starts to cry. Oh, I feel so bad for you. And my younger daughter comes to me and she goes like this, Dad, this is actually a good thing. I'm like, why? She's like, you're going to make some money with the tooth fairy. Right? And I'm looking at her, I'm like, listen, girls, you only, the tooth fairy only comes if, your teeth fall off in itself. But if somebody knocks the teeth out of your mouth, I don't think it's going to come at any moment. And they're like, oh, okay. But anyways, it was an interesting conversation because this gets very interesting. What I learned is that to show our vulnerability is not a bad thing after all. I think as men, we're culturally taught that we have to project ourselves as superhumans. And the reality of it, we're not. It's just a mask that we are wearing. And when we let that mask fall and we show that, yeah, we can lose and, we can make mistakes and, we can get knocked out. I think that people connect with you. And I think my daughters are more connected with me now than they were before this incident, just because I allowed myself to be vulnerable and be honest with them. And then that actually, the same thing happened with my students, when I allowed them to see me on this situation, not without my teeth, but to see through the situation instead of hiding what happened to me. I think that we connected on a much more special way, because the reality of it is we are no superhero. We are no superhumans. We all have our flaws and mistakes, and we are all a work in progress, right? And I think that people admire and connect and get inspired more by an imperfect human being who's trying his best to be the very best that he can be for himself and for people around him. Then they connect with a distant character that is flawless and is able to fly and has a red cape. That will only inspire people to a certain extent. But if that superhero image gets too far, and if we wear that mask too long, it actually begin intimidating people, and that defeats the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish as teachers and in life in general.
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous line of, I've always believed that, as a male, as a father, there's certain roles that you have to be like, well, you're the protector of the family, and that's how, but many people, I don't know, I feel now is not to misconstrue, put in a fake, a fake wall or a fake to your, especially your kids.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be where it's I feel that I don't want to be dishonest.
Yeah.
Even though if maybe there's something that I want to share with them, and I won't be dishonest and say, I'm not perfect. I'm not, I'm human. Mm-hmm. And I did make a mistake, or something did happen to me, and I'm bettering myself now. I think having your kids see you making yourself better consistently is way more valuable than to hear stories of how good you were or how good you are, as opposed to like, well, I always value somebody like bettering themselves. You mentioned earlier, like we were talking in conversation, and you like listening and reading on self-help books and how to make yourself better. Yeah. That speaks volumes, just knowing that about somebody, because it makes you like, okay, you're not perfect. Yeah. I always like, okay, well, how can I make myself better as even as a parent, as a husband, as a leader at work or something. You have to admire somebody that they're not just like, okay, I made it to this point and I'm done getting better. Like I like the fact that like, you know, I hopefully that, you know, Ryan and my other sons see like, okay, maybe my dad, I say maybe they're seeing me as like, okay, he's making himself better, you know, in jiu-jitsu, in doing this podcast with us, trying to spend time with us and making, or, you know, or seeing that like I'm making an effort into making myself a better person. I think that's way more valuable than walking around, like you said, with the cape and having your kids think you can fly.
100%, because if you're trying to project to people around you that you're perfect, and we all have that tendency, you're going to be very afraid of making mistakes, or at least showing that you've made a mistake. And then the first thing that you violate is honesty, right? People would rather follow a person that is real than a person that is always right, right? So I think honesty is something that we can't get too far without, right? So that's the first thing. You know, the second thing is that you will strip yourself from the most important thing you got to do to succeed, which is to learn from your lessons. Because if you're so afraid of making mistakes that when you do them, you even hide them, you're not going to think about the lessons that you can learn from them. I'm proud of every single fight that I lost. I'm proud of every mistake that I've made, because first, I took responsibility. I was honest. I admitted that mistake. Second, I learned from it. So the person that I am today is not the accumulation of my victories, trophies, medals, how much money is on my bank account, or how many people follow me on social media. The person that I am today is the accumulation of the lessons that I've learned through my mistakes. That for me is a good way of living through jiu-jitsu, and it's a good way of living like my own life, because we always must be aspiring for something. We always got to have a name, we got to have a goal, and hopefully that goal is going to be benefiting not just ourselves, but as many people as possible. I think that the moment in our lives that we become too comfortable, you know, I have making enough money, or I've won enough tournaments, or I've taught that many students, or whatever that is, it's the moment that we're going to start departing away from the very person that allow us to get to where we got. So what we got to do is we got to always be striving to something else. And I don't mean that in a way that you want to appreciate what you've learned and what you've built, but you always got to be looking into what's your next thing? And you always got to be pursuing that, because pursuing your goals will expose imperfections, and will expose things that you still need to learn to be able to accomplish those things. Because if a goal, if aim doesn't require you to grow to get there, it's not really a goal. You can get there by default. You put on autopilot, you're going to get there. So I think that our kids appreciate, will admire us for the rest of their lives if they see that we're always aspiring to achieve things that will benefit us, will benefit them, will benefit as many people as possible. And they will stop admiring us if we just settle for who we are, physically, mentally, spiritually, and that's the moment that most likely will no longer be a role model for them.
Yeah, it's a constant, especially, you know, jiu-jitsu. I mean, jiu-jitsu thing's kind of like being a parent. You constantly have to be learning, because one day it's not. Yeah, it's not going to be the same one day earlier. Yeah. You know, which like it doesn't get. You know, when they're 8, it's not. A lot of they're one way, and when they're 13, it's a whole other challenge. You know, Ryan and I were just talking about high school. He's going to be going to high school next year, and he's excited because, you know, he's like, okay, I want to kind of do this and do that, and we're just talking about this driving up here, and it's a good time when we try and we drive and we talk about certain things, and I was like, hey, your mind's gonna change, you know, by the end of the day. Today, it's gonna change 10 times by the end of the year. You know, and enjoy it right now, but just like I said, like make yourself better. You know, you know, what consistently as your grades, math, science, whatever it is that, you know, and wait, you know, don't fixate yourself on one thing right now, you know, and that's how parenting is too. I think kind of is with that, like jiu-jitsu kind of the same way. Don't fix yourself like I'm just a Barambola guy, or I'm just a, you know, top takedown guy. It's kind of, you have to like branch out a little bit, learn a little bit more. And I try to explain to him, like, you know, be open to opportunities and other lessons in life. Yeah. But, one of the topics that Ryan and we were talking about coming up here is I see with the kids, like the big poster in your wall, is how do you lead your students at that age into, I mean, is it fair to always like, hey, jiu-jitsu is something that you can do when you grow up? Is it something, do you lead those kids like in like the competitive 13-year-olds? Mm-hmm. Do you lead them into thinking like, hey, you can be a world champion, you should always train jiu-jitsu? Or do you kind of view jiu-jitsu like, I don't know if I'm trying to make a sense that we talked about is jiu-jitsu is always going to be here for you.
Yeah.
Do you like sharing the idea to them like, hey, jiu-jitsu, like you got to train jiu-jitsu like every day? Or do you like it like, hey, no, take it, don't get burnt out on jiu-jitsu so fast?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. And, I think first you got to understand what your students' goals are, right? We're 13 years old, a lot's happening. A lot's happening in any age, but that age, entering your teenage year, a lot's happening. They're having visions for their lives, like you said. Like every second and every vision is different than the other. They think about becoming a music pop star. They think about becoming the next UFC champion, and they think about becoming the next scientist with the next breakthrough, whatever that is. And really, because the world lies ahead of them, and they know that they have huge potential. So you got to understand what their goals are and treat them. Well, I don't treat all my students the same. I treat them according to their goals, right? So if I have a student like Ryan that wants to become a world champion, I'm going to treat him a certain way. If I have a student that is just here because he's being bullied at school, he lacks self-confidence, I'm going to treat him another way. However, there's one common denominator. The lessons you learn in jiu-jitsu are not only going to make you, if you learn them, a jiu-jitsu champion, but they're going to make you a champion in life, right? I operate with this idea that I want to build everyday champions on and off the mats. And what I mean by that, and that's a big philosophy among many instructors within Gracie Barra, what we mean by that is that we want them to embrace the mindset of the championship mindset. Because what's the mindset that you operate when you go compete at the championship level? Like if it's a final match, you worked your whole life for it. You're going to be at your very best. You're going to wake up early. You're going to eat right. You're going to dress right. You're going to shower. You're going to do everything perfect because that day is arriving. It's finally that moment has come. It's the moment that you're going to achieve the pinnacle of your life, right? So you picture that perfect day, the day that's going to allow you to become the best in the world. And then you bring it back to your everyday life. Can we live our life every day like that? Because if you do, then you become a champion no matter what, even if you lose, right? Because it's the idea that the things you got to do to become the best in the world, just do that with every single thing you do in your life and do that every day in your life. Because then, not only you become the best in the world at any field, but even if you don't, because the other person trained more, you got an injury or something, you're still going to be the very best that you can. And that is the most important victory. Not the medal, not the Facebook likes, not the money that you might make, but just know well enough that you've done every single day of your life the very best that you could. And that's what we try to teach the kids here. And jiu-jitsu is an amazing tool to teach people that because it exposes their flaws, not just character flaws, but physical flaws, and it allows us to correct. Jiu-jitsu puts a mirror right in front of their face. That's why so many people quit jiu-jitsu, Mark. Think about it. Jiu-jitsu is a mirror. People are not willing to deal with their own self-image. You can't hide in jiu-jitsu. Every jiu-jitsu instructor says the mats don't lie. Why? Because you're going to realize who you are, and you're not going to like it. Now, if you have the courage, then you can work. Jiu-jitsu is also going to give you the tools because you're going to be working with an amazing instructor, with amazing training partners. It's going to give you the tools to overcome those flaws, to overcome those weaknesses. And what's going to get at the end of the journey, and it's not the end of the journey at all, but the black belt version of yourself is a version that doesn't have those flaws, right? Now, if the kids that come here, if they become black belt world champions, man, awesome. But I'll be just as happy, or maybe even more, if they become black belt doctors, black belt lawyers, black belt husbands, black belt fathers, in a sense that they just learned to have the daily habit of giving their very best to everything that they do, no matter the role that they play.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it is. I mean, you got to be the best at what's going to make you better. I mean, you got to be, if you're going to be a father, be the best father that you can be. When my professor always says, like, if you're going to be the best doctor, be the best doctor. If you're going to be the best window washer, be the best window washer. But because you're going to be yourself, you're going to be the best for yourself. It's the best version of yourself. And I like you were talking about world championships and you just won your third Masters Worlds, right? This last year.
Yeah.
So in August, like that's your third one. Like, wow, that's amazing. And
that was awesome.
And that's why I like not that I liked it, but I like that you shared that you're like, your body's breaking down. And I'm like, okay, good. Because I don't feel as bad now. Like, I can barely walk now. Like my knees giving out on me. And how do you continue on at that level to be so competitive?
Yeah.
I mean, because I've seen you still compete against adults sometimes, and you just compete at Masters World and Masters 2. I mean, that's not that's not a kick in the I say. How do you still find not just the fire, but how do you still continue on like health wise?
So first, the fire. I'm still to find the motivation that is going to replace my original motivation into jiu-jitsu, which was to become the very best that I can be. And the only way I can know that I've become the very best I can be is by competing against the best people at my age and that live a similar lifestyle that I live in, right? I don't dare to register for the adult heavyweight at the world championships level because I just couldn't keep up with them. And it's a level of fighting that I can't get hurt. And it's just what I would have to do to be able to even keep up with those guys, I would have to sacrifice things that I appreciate much more than that experience in itself. So I'm still to find the motivation that's going to allow me to live a happy life that is different than always trying to be the best that I can be. Because that motivation is so important to my own being, I'm still motivated every single day to train, to take care of my body, to eat well, to learn new techniques, and to try to compete. However, I wrapped up last year and I told my wife, and that I was considering, putting my competition days to the past and not compete anymore. And I will hold on to that promise for as long as I can find a motivation that will allow me to continue to live happily every single day of my life, because I feel like something is missing if I'm not training hard.
You're so competitive.
I'm so competitive. But again, it's not about being better than other people. It's about competing with amazing opponents that will allow me to be at my best. Like, they motivate me to be at my best. And I feel like that if I don't do that, then I'm going to start deteriorating into something that is not my ideal self, and that's not a price that I'm willing to pay. But to touch on a point, yes, my body is breaking down. I'm having major lower back pains. I have a numbness on my thumb. I got to figure it out how long I can do it. And honestly, I can't picture myself still competing for too long, because competition is a selfish thing. It's something that you do for yourself. And there's got to be a point in your life that enough is enough. What's another world title? What's another, I don't know, whatever it is that you can win through these competitions? What is that going to do for you besides what the process does, which is to keep you very close to your best self? And so what I'm looking for right now is not to compete this year, and to find something that will allow me to continue to stay motivated to be at my very best. Because if competition is the price that I have to pay to be at my best, I'm still willing to pay this price. But if I can find another thing that will keep me motivated to be in great physical shape, to keep my jiu-jitsu sharp, to keep my mind sharp, I would like to. I have been trying since August. I haven't really found it. So the fact that I have so many amazing young athletes here that are trying to become the best in the world, and they're learning how to run a jiu-jitsu academy, helps, because they all look up to me to a certain extent, and they like to train with me, and I've become a target for them, and I like that because they keep pushing me.
Yeah.
You know, they starting to catch up with me, and I told them, you know, if by the end of 2019 you're all not finishing me, something's really wrong with you because I'm getting old, and you know, you gotta do it.
You're catching up. This is your chance right now, right?
Exactly.
It's a chance to get back for all those other times.
Yeah, but having them here helps a lot. You know, I just love to train, man. I love jiu-jitsu. I love jiu-jitsu. Up to do now, like I was jiu-jitsu instructor, I love jiu-jitsu. I love what's happening with the sport. I love the technical development, and jiu-jitsu makes me happy. So for me to be in a good shape is not something that comes at a huge price. Besides the fact that I have to compete every once in a while, and that takes a good chunk of my time getting ready for those.
Yeah, and it is a sacrifice. You mentioned that it's a selfish endeavor.
Yeah.
Because you have to put in the time to be, and you're just not just going to walk in there. I'm like, okay, I'm just 3-4 days a week, roll harder. I mean, if you're at a level, I'm sure you're sacrificing time, which time includes family, your responsibilities at home.
Yeah, because it's not going to do much for you if you're not entering to win. There's no point in entering a contest if you don't believe you can win. I'm some people say, oh, what matters is that you participate. Get out of here, man. You know, like if you go out there, you put yourself in a position that you go to win. If you don't feel like you can win, don't go. Choose a level of competition that you feel like you can win. That's the thing. You got to compete at a level that you can win. And if you don't, great. You learn your lessons, you come home, you get better, right? But I can't deal with the idea. I can't agree with the idea that I'm just going to go there because I want to be part of it. It doesn't make any sense because it's fight. It's a sport. You expose yourself. So you go out there with the desire and the belief that you can win, because that's when you grow. Because if you go there just to cruise and have fun, you're not going to learn anything. What's the point of going out there? If I'm going to Las Vegas and I want to have fun, why would I compete on the World Championships? I'll go watch Cirque du Soleil. I'll have more fun doing that, you know? I'll have fun if I try to win. That's fun, because pursuing victory is fun. But if I win, it's even more fun. It doesn't get any more fun than that when you win. It's really amazing feeling. But if I don't win, it's still worth it. It was still fun because I tried to win. And I lost. I come home upset. I learn my lessons and I get better from it.
Yeah. Do you believe in that you don't lose, you learn, and that mentality of you never lose, you learn?
Yeah.
You hear that a lot.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. But it's become very superficial now, yeah? Very superficial. So I think people need to see through it. It's become cliche. That's what people say,
Okay,
I guess.
yeah.
So yes, so there is no losing in jiu-jitsu. You either win or you learn.
Yeah.
Well, you're only gonna learn if you accept that you lost, right? If you're in denial, I'm not even upset. It worries me when one of my students loses and they don't get upset, because that means they don't care. If they don't care, they don't have the motivation to dig in and learn the lessons they're supposed to learn to get better from it. So when they lose, you're supposed to get upset. Now people confuse the shortcoming of a tournament match to say you lost the match. That's not like a major loss if you learn something from it. The only loss you can have, really, and that's true, the only loss you can have really from not winning a match or not winning a championship is the loss of self-esteem that eventually might lead you into quitting. But when you lose, period. You have to accept your defeat and you have to learn from it. But then you're going to let it go. The moment it's happened to me in the toughest losses of my life, in relationships, in business, in sports, everything. Whenever I allowed, and even with this recent incident in the no-gi world, whenever I reached the point that I felt like I learned what that situation was trying to teach me, I was able to let it go and move forward a better person. So you can't really say I lost. Oh, but you got a concussion, you lost 2 teeth. That's true. That was tough. It was a little humiliating. Yes, that was rough. But I've been through the whole psychological process, and I reached the of anger, fear, feeling of revenge, and I got to a point that I learned the lessons. And from that point on, I was able to let go, and I became a better person. So yeah, there were some losses, but I also gained something. And I think that's what that saying means. There is no losing in jiu-jitsu. You either win Or you learn if you allow yourself to learn something. Because if you don't, then you lost twice. You not only lost the championship, but you lost something that is even more precious than that. You lost the opportunity to learn a life-changing lesson.
And you're going to stay the same track.
Yeah.
Or whatever made you lose, you're going to keep doing the same thing.
And you're going to lose again.
Yeah, exactly. If it's relationship-wise, whether if it's at work or the same jiu-jitsu, you keep putting your head down, you're going to keep getting choked the same way every single time.
Exactly. And it happens. It's crazy. I coach a lot of students. Some of them, I'm like, man, he's trapped there. There's something that he's not learning. When I trapped, I mean, he's just not getting better. He's supposed to get better. Like, if you put your head, to use your example, Mark, if you put your head a certain way and the guy chokes you out, well, it's even my dog. You're not gonna put the head there. If my dog jumps on my bed and I yell at it, and my dog knows I'm not supposed to do that, he's not gonna keep jumping on the bed again and again. And with some people, that's why jiu-jitsu is so amazing, because it exposes them. This guy is strapped. Sometimes I'm like, man, maybe this person has learning disability. That's when I put them on the side. I'm like, man, what's wrong with you? You're not seeing that what you're doing is not working? No, I'm not, because they're in denial. They can't realize the mistake they made. They don't have the self-awareness. And then as an instructor, sometimes it's not just about teaching a new technique or how to escape. It's just about creating self-awareness. Man, you're terrible at this. Man, your guard sucks. In a nice way. Yeah. Man, your takedown game is awful. Really? I didn't know about that. Yeah, I had no idea. Don't know? You get taken down all the time.
I had no idea. Wow. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, you get so fixated. And I don't know, maybe either you don't take it into like, oh, wow, that person passed my guard maybe that one time, but you go so fixated on not it being a problem. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, well, I don't want to fix it, because it's hard to fix a habit.
Yeah,
it's a bad habit, it's hard to fix. It's hard to create good habits, but I think it's a lot worse to fix a bad habit. Yeah. And in jiu-jitsu is a lot worse, because you're gonna get hurt or submitted or something worse in jiu-jitsu, because you're in that always like, okay, well, I haven't done, I'm gonna keep doing the same thing the same exact way. I do that all the time too. It's just,
well, we all do.
Yeah, I just get stuck in that way. Like, okay, well, I gotta figure out a different way to handle this situation, or I don't know. It's a tough pill to swallow when you realize like, I'm not as good as I thought.
Especially because our habits, they're created because they've been rewarded. You don't create a habit to anything that you have, rewarded, right? So you're rewarded, and then it's hard to let go, because what you want is the reward that habit used to have. So if you pass the guard a certain way and it's worked for you for a while. So let me give you a real example. Like, I've always had like a great butterfly guard. Always had a great butterfly. Well, not always. I learned that as a blue belt from my brother Ricardo and a lot of his training partners, and everybody at Gracie Barra was good at it, and I learned it. I'm like, okay, I'm good. And I'm sweeping people throughout many tournaments, many belts for years, until people decided to stand up to pass the guard. Right? Because that was an evolution of the guard pass. You got to understand, for the butterfly guard to work, the people need to be on their knees. Otherwise, it's just you don't have the elements you need to execute that game. So all of a sudden, there was this trend that everybody was standing up to pass the guards. When the knee slide started to show up, the leg drag only happened like many, many years later. But anyways, all of a sudden I was like, man, my guard is terrible. And I kept trying to do butterfly guard, but if you butterfly guard with the guy standing up, he's just gonna jump to the side, he's gonna pass your guard. And I was getting so frustrated, but I had the habit of the butterfly guard because I was rewarded by it. So what you said, it's hard to let go of bad habits. Why? Because we were rewarded by it sometimes for years. So for you to be able to get rid of it, you have to find a new reward to the new habit you're trying to create, right? And that's been proven truth. There's a great book called The Power of Habits, right? It talks about triggers and rewards and how the habit is whatever happens in between. And if you want to replace a habit like being a gambler or an alcoholic, you have to be able to create a new trigger and a new reward. And then, you can't just get rid of a habit. You got to replace it with something. So if you want a person to stop drinking, you have to create a reward for the new behavior that the person is trying to embrace. Otherwise, it just won't happen, because what's hard to get rid of is not the habit. It's the reward that you used to get from that old habit, right?
Yeah, that's amazing analogy. How you laid it out. The whole just really interesting. You mentioned the everybody passing on their knees, and then like the evolution of the stand up pass.
Yeah,
I and it's so weird like that to hear like that was like something new. Like, oh wow, nobody, it's end up passing.
It was new.
Yeah. So yeah, and yeah, of course it would kill any kind of butterfly guy player, especially if like, okay, well he's not in my guard or he's not on his knees. Yeah. But how did you adjust to that though?
Man, it was tough. So first, I was always a very forward fighter in a sense that there's some fighters that are passive and they're waiting for the opportunity. I was always the guy that tried to create the opportunities. Just my personality, the way I was raised, kind of showed in jiu-jitsu. So if you are a forward fighter, you don't stay on your back. You sit, right? That is back in the old days. Now, just guards are crazy. But anyways, so sitting up it shows an intention. You don't sit up to defend guard. You sit up to sweep somebody. If you want to defend guard, if you want to prevent the guard from being passed, keep your back on the mats. So the spider guard and the lasso guard were there. So when people stand up, the resources of any sort of sit-up guard are very limited. So the first adaptation that I did, I switched my hand from the belt, which is a traditional butterfly guard. Oops, excuse me. And I put the hand on the collar. So you have a sit-up guard where I'm holding the collar and my hand is on the floor and I'm moving around. I'm trying to collar drag them, pick up the ankle. But then the problem with that position is that people can fly and armbar you, but they pop the grip and then you lose them. So eventually I adapted by engaging in De La Riva. And I became really good at grabbing somebody's legs and standing up from it with a single leg and getting a takedown. And it's still my go-for move, whenever I'm on the bottom. Now I've been implementing a little bit more of a technical lapel game. I just engage back on the mats, De La Riva, and I try to sit up and grab the leg. When I did knee slide, and I grab the leg. But I've never became a very technical fighter as far as like being able to defend my guard well. I was never able to transition out of that dominant sit-up butterfly guard setup that I developed on the collar belts.
Wow, that's
yeah.
I always interested in when hear a lot of fighters that have been doing one move, if it's lasso, like how did they leave the lasso, if they're even able to leave or learn something new to master, like, okay, well, I mastered lasso, do they stick with it? Or, okay, do I develop something else? Because you would think that somebody like, okay, if that competitor that compete every single tournament is always going to give me a lasso, like you would think that, okay, well, I'm not going to let that person, get me in a lasso, So I like hearing everybody's, their mental breakdown on like what they did and how they do it and how I mean, hopefully their game evolves, and unfortunately I'm the kind of type like, okay, well, I like kind of playing my game and it's so hard to leave. Like, okay, I like the comfort of, half guard. I like the comfort of deep half. I like the you getting the hell beat out of you on the bottom. He goes, but, I'm comfortable down here now. Like, gosh, I don't know if I would be comfortable as a, straight top guy or a straight, a takedown guy. Yeah. So that's an awesome analogy.
Yeah, here's a thought that I think the listeners will appreciate. Like, have you ever asked yourself, why is it that a white belt, a blue belt, or even kids they learn much more than a black belt? Have you ever asked yourself, like, why is it that a black belt's learning curve is so flat? That's for me, that's a fascinating question. And that's truth. Like, when you're a black belt, unless you're a phenom, your learning curve is flat. Like, you learn very little every year compared to how much a white belt, a blue belt, a purple belt is learning. Of course, we have accumulated so much more knowledge that you still be able to do well against those people, but their learning curve is so much more steep, right? I think that's a great question, in my opinion. I ask myself that very often, because if you could find a way of make my learning curve as steep as it was when I was a blue belt and purple belt, I could probably still compete on the adult black belt division. But the reality of it is, as you accumulate knowledge, your learning curve flattens out because you build those shelters of comfort, and they are amazing shelters, right? So probably your deep half guard or my smash pass game or whatever is it that you've built for yourself over many years of training, they become a shelter, and we all want to have a shelter, but they also become a prison in a sense that they prevent you from growing. So if you want to continue, in my opinion, what I concluded, if you want to continue getting better, you have to stick your head out of the castle that you've built for yourself through many years. What is so called our A game, or that's my game. That's what I like to do. Just think, if you're listening to this, ask what is it you like to do. You've been training jiu-jitsu for more than a decade. That's great. I'm glad you have a game. You should have a game. That's awesome. But be careful you don't become a prisoner of your own game, because if you do that, then your jiu-jitsu is not going to get better. And if your jiu-jitsu is not going to get better, eventually you're going to fall behind. Not behind in the sense that we're comparing ourselves to other people, but you're going to fall behind from the very best fighter you could become, right? The reason why we stop learning is because we start not exposing ourselves as much, and we start hiding behind the walls of the game that we have developed for ourselves. And that's a good thing to a certain extent. You do that too much, you become stagnant, and jiu-jitsu is no fun anymore.
Yeah, it's true. I think it'd be kind of boring. Okay, I'm gonna do the same thing, and or if you're that good, like, okay, here we go, and no one can pass, whatever I'm doing, or I can pass everybody's guard this one way, and then until you kind of meet the person that's like, okay, well, bring it. Like, okay, I know exactly what you're gonna do, and I've mastered that. You mastered that. Okay, well, I've mastered the counter to that, and you're kind of stuck in that. Like, okay, well, that's. I don't know. Do you feel that an attacker as meaning a top forward person, is more or can be more advantageous to a person that's reactive more, like at the bottom, more of a bottom player, or is there a benefit to either one, or is it both equally as well?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question? Like,
would it be a top person, a smash pass, guard passer? Are they as well? Is it more dangerous being on the bottom, or is it because I always see a lot of top pressure people, they're pressure passing, and then either they pass the guard or they get snatched up. Like they forget, they're sticking their head in the hole, or they're leaving an arm in the leg and they get arm barred right away, or they get triangled. Is there a benefit? Do you see, like, you tell your students what's better to learn first is
to be top or on the bottom?
Bottom?
Yeah, so I have a philosophy on that. I believe should be a priority in terms of the development of the jiu-jitsu game. We should develop our defensive game first and then our offensive game. It doesn't mean you're not going to learn how to do a submission on the first year of training. It's not that. It's just in terms of priorities, right? Because we got to remind ourselves that jiu-jitsu is a self-defense art, and there's a philosophical set of values that are appreciated at first, that people need to respect. And it doesn't make sense for you to just get your student and turn them into killers before they're able to protect themselves, right? You create holes in the student's game. So my philosophy is, and we teach everything. Our curriculum is a 16-week curriculum, and we put emphasis on top and bottom. But when I'm talking to them, I always put, guys, at least on the first year of training, it's more important not to let your guard be passed than to get a sweep. It's more important not to be swept than to pass a guard, right? Because you create a foundation of self-protection and survival that is a very solid foundation for you to be able to grow from, as opposed to you being great at some sweeps, but your guard gets passed all the time, or being great at passing the guard, but you get swept all the time. And so that's kind of like my philosophy there. And I'm fascinated by what the guard represents in martial arts, the jiu-jitsu guard. It's an amazing resource of self-protection. It's by far the best resource, and I attribute the guard, in my understanding, to the genius of the Gracie family, right? I believe Carlos Helio, Halls, and many others place enormous contributions there from the martial arts perspective. Because if you're weaker, if I'm gonna have a fight, right, and this person is much bigger than me, exchanging punches is not where I have advantage. My ability to overcome a bigger, heavier, and stronger opponent, a more athletic opponent, is way increased if I have my back on the mats because my head is far. I have my legs to protect myself. Our legs are stronger than the person's arm. I can kick, I can choke, I can do incredible things, and I can use my legs to sweep the person. So the guard is such a huge innovation, and perhaps the biggest contribution ever done by Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to martial arts in general was the advent of the guard as a means for self-defense. So when I teach beginners, I emphasize a lot on that. Guard is not just one of the many positions in Jiu-Jitsu, it's the position in Jiu-Jitsu in regards to you being able to protect yourself. And then some Jiu-Jitsu instructors argue the mount to be the most important position in Jiu-Jitsu. Well, the mount is the pinnacle of grappling in regards to control, in regards to dominance. So it's kind of flipping that coin. Now, as far as self-protection, the guard and they're the opposite, right? So the mount is the opposite of the guard, and the guard is the, like, positionally speaking, right? So if the mount represents the preeminence of dominance in grappling, the guard represents the preeminence of your ability to protect yourself in a fight situation. And I am fascinated by it, and I try to pass that as much as possible to my students.
That's amazing to hear that. You should be the Flavio Almeida podcast. I mean, I love listening to your analogy of everything and how you break it down, and because everybody has their way to break things down, like how they view guard or top game or takedowns or life or something, and it's a really respectable, and I can see how you have such a great loyal following for your students, and how you're continue to be a great focal point, especially in Arizona, being a great somebody that people look up to. And I hope people do. Like they from the podcast, I hope they get, like, this is a side that I haven't heard from him. I know you've been on other podcasts, but hopefully our listeners like view, like, this is a different side of Professor Flavio. We get to see it, not just coaching wise, especially outside of Gracie Barra. I'm sure Gracie Barra, everybody knows how amazing you are, and especially if your students here, but people that are out there that not as familiar with Gracie Barra or yourself, and especially hearing your thoughts on just life in general. And it's a great mentality that you have. It's really admirable.
Thank you, sir.
And to hear from you about that, though. But I know you have a really busy day, Professor, and I hate keeping you. The clock is right up behind your head, and I'm like, oh wow, I just looked at it right now, and fight to win today. Tonight, you have a bunch of fighters tonight too. And first of all, from Ryan and I, thank you. We thank you for inviting us to your school. And
it's been a pleasure.
And I know we tried to do this last year, or reached out to you last year to get this, and then unfortunate things happened. And I'm so amazing that you were open to meet with us.
Of course, it's my pleasure. I think you guys do a great job. Great questions, and it's been a great conversation. I think we've been here for a while, but time flew fast, which means we had a lot of fun. And I think a lot of people see me as a Gracie Barra guy, but I'm also a member of the Jiu-Jitsu community. Everything that I do is for the growth of Jiu-Jitsu. Even bringing Gracie Barra here in Arizona, a big part of one bullet point in our goals here with Gracie Barra Arizona is to move Jiu-Jitsu in Arizona forward, right? And I love how welcoming everybody has been to us. I've been here for a little bit over 3 years, and not only our students, but just members of our other teams. I mean, you are from Carlos Gracie, I'm from Gracie Barra, but people here in Arizona, the Jiu-Jitsu community here in Arizona, like, hats off to everybody here, all the professors. Everybody's very, very respectful.
It's growing here.
It's growing, really, and everybody is
That.
respectful, and it's really like an amazing community, and different in a sense that we're much more friendly than most. And we battle each other in competition, but we never let our rivalry go beyond that. And we always finish with a respect and a handshake. And I think that we're doing great things for Jiu-Jitsu in the world, and the world is watching, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's great. Awesome. I'm glad you guys came here. It's a different dynamic. Yeah. Which was your first school in Arizona?
Scottsdale.
The Scottsdale one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think Chandler opened up kind of by us out that way. And so I always liked competition. I always like people. I hate hearing people like, oh, so-and-so's coming. Yeah. Or like even like tournaments, or, oh, so-and-so's like has a tournament now. Or like, well, that's good.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
That's good.
Makes it better.
You have to raise up your game.
100%.
Like if there's only one tournament in one state or one how boring is that? They're not there. They're never going to be level. They're never going to change or expand until somebody else comes in and like, okay, they brought in, they raised the level, so I got to raise the level now. The same thing with Gracie Barra coming in. It's like, hey, there's a whole other dynamic here. You guys you want to grow, you want to make your teams better. It's like, you got to change your way of like, this is you want to keep up, you want to be competitive in tournaments. Like, hey, this is good. It's not bad. You guys be good to be competitive. Don't be afraid to lose students. And if you lose, I always felt if you lose students, you lost them a long time ago. Yeah. Just because someone came in and like, I think that they were ready to go. And I think, but like, hey, everybody gets better. Competition gets better. It's always awesome to see, when Ryan competes, he competes against Gracie Barra kids, and he competes. I'm glad. I'm so happy to see your guys' success. I look forward to seeing you guys compete more and other schools open them up. It's amazing. It's great to. But I wish you the best, Professor. And
thanks, Mark.
And everything, and tonight especially too. Good luck to all your students.
Thank you. They'll do good.
And I bet, they'll do good. And I know there's a lot still in the future for us here too.
For sure.
All right, Professor. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Good job, you guys.
Thank you.
This is fun.